This is part 34, preparation for NSE4 exam. HA, high availability, memory-based failover. The following high availability configuration instructs FortiGate to perform memory-based failover. Go to command line interface and type config system HA. Then first set memory-based failover enable. Second, set memory-failover-threshold and then put percentage, for example 70. Third, set memory-failover-monitor-period and then number 30. 30 is measured in seconds, so it means that it elects a new primary when memory usage exceeds 70%, memory failover threshold 70%, when it exceeds for 30 seconds. Then set memory-failover-sample-rate 2. This checks memory usage every 2 seconds. Then set memory-failover-flip-timeout 20. Then end. Memory failover flip timeout means that next primary election will be in 20 minutes. During primary election, a failover occurs when the primary memory usage of a secondary member is lower than configured memory threshold. Configured memory threshold, we put set memory-failover-threshold 70. In this case, 70%. If so, the secondary member becomes new primary. The cluster doesn't elect new primary again for the flip timeout of 20 minutes. Flip timeout is set memory-failover-flip-timeout and then number in minutes 20. Each member in the cluster checks its memory usage every 2 seconds. So set memory failover sample rate 2. If during the primary election the memory usage of all members are below or above the threshold, the other criteria such as monitored interfaces, priority, uptime, and so on, they are used as T-breakers to elect a new primary FortiGate device. The HA configuration instructs FortiGate to perform a failover when any of the SSD disks of the primary FortiGate report EXT-FS errors. So this is for SSD failover. Note that this feature as SSD failover is supported only on FortiGate models with solid-state drives. it is configured. Config system HA. Set SSD dash failover enable and virtual MAC address failover. MAC stands for Media Access Control. To forward traffic correctly, FortiGate high availability solution uses virtual MAC addresses. So when primary FortiGate joins an HA cluster, each interface is associated with virtual MAC address. The high availability group ID, HA group ID, is used in the creation of virtual MAC addresses assigned to each interface. If so, you have two or more high availability clusters in the same broadcast domain. And using the same HA group ID, you might get MAC address conflicts. In those cases, it is strongly recommended that you assign a different high availability group ID to each cluster. Through the heartbeats, the primary informs all secondary devices about the assigned virtual MAC address. High availability heartbeat interfaces are not assigned a virtual MAC address. Upon failover, newly elected primary FortiGate adopts the same virtual MAC addresses for the equivalent interfaces. The new primary broadcasts gratuitous ARP packets. Gratuitous, usually it means done without any good reason or given free of charge, but in this case, gratuitous ARP is an ARP response that is not prompted by ARP request. The gratuitous ARP stands for Address Resolution Protocol, is sent as a broadcast as a way for a node to announce or update its IP address to MAC mapping to the entire network. New primary FortiGate ARP packets sends to notify network that each virtual MAC address is now reachable through the different FortiGate, so through different switch port. Note that the MAC address of a reserved high availability management interface is not changed to a virtual MAC address. Instead, the reserved management interface keeps its original MAC address. Failure of a secondary FortiGate. If a primary FortiGate fails, then new primary is elected. But what we do when a secondary FortiGate fails? It depends on the high availability mode. As we know, there are two modes for high availability. It is AA, active-active, and AP, active-passive. In active-passive mode, in this cluster, the primary only updates its list of available secondary FortiGate devices. It also starts monitoring for the failed secondary device, waiting for it to come up again. In active cluster, the secondary devices, they also can handle the traffic. So the primary, which tracks and assigns sessions to each secondary device, must not only update its list of available secondary devices, but also reassign sessions from the failed FortiGate to a different secondary FortiGate. Workload. Workload is how the workload is distributed between the roles. There are two roles in HA: active and active-passive. In active-passive high availability cluster, primary FortiGate receives and processes all the traffic, and all secondary devices wait passively. In active high availability cluster, the primary receives all traffic and redirects some proxy-based sessions to secondary devices. Traffic workload is distributed on active mode only. Note that by default, only sessions that are subject to proxy inspection are distributed to secondary devices. So if you want to force the distribution of all sessions that are subject to flow inspection or no inspection at all, then you must enable load-balance-all setting. You need to enable it under HA configuration. We usually put HA configuration as config system HA and then enable load-balance-all. This setting is disabled by default. Thank you.